There are lines you do not cross, promises you do not break, and there are sacrifices you do not question. Sergeant Marcus Thorne, a Green Beret who had given everything for his country, thought he had left the battlefield behind him. He had built a new life, a new company, and a new mission, hiring the veterans that America had forgotten. His success was a testament to the values forged in fire: honor, discipline, and an unbreakable code of loyalty. They invited him onto national television to celebrate that success. But this wasn't a celebration, it was an ambush. They thought they could dismantle a hero, piece by piece, under the glare of the studio lights. They thought his service was a talking point, and his honor was a commodity. They were about to learn a timeless lesson. You don't corner a man who has already walked through fire. It had all started with an email 3 days earlier, an invitation from The Croft Report, the biggest, most carnivorous news talk show in the nation. His company, Aegis Solutions, had just done the impossible. They had secured the Triton contract, a colossal government initiative to completely redesign the country's failing disaster relief logistics. They hadn't just competed, they had dominated, outmaneuvering and outplanning corporate giants who had owned the space for a generation. Aegis, a company built from scratch, staffed by veterans, and run on the principles of loyalty and mission focus, had just become a major player. "It's a trap, Marcus," his second-in-command, Dave, had warned him, pointing at the screen. Dave had served with him in the Green Berets. He could read a situation better than anyone. Julian Croft doesn't interview people. He prosecutes them. He'll use your service, your success, everything, and twist it into a weapon against you. This isn't our turf. They have all the advantages here. Marcus had looked past Dave, out the panoramic window of their Dallas headquarters. He saw the logic, the undeniable truth in the warning. But retreating was not in his DNA. "Then we make it our turf," he'd said, his voice quiet but firm. "They want a story, Dave. We have a story to tell. Not just about us, but about all of them. The ones who didn't get a parade when they came home to a world that didn't understand them. It's time someone told it on the biggest stage they have." He knew the risk. A public misstep could damage the company he'd bled for, the company that was a lifeline for the dozens of veterans he employed. But a victory could change the narrative for thousands more. So now he was here, the makeup feeling like clay on his skin, the tailored suit feeling more restrictive than body armor. He thought of his friend Mikey, a fallen comrade from his first tour. Mikey would have laughed his ass off seeing me in a makeup chair, he thought, a fleeting, bittersweet smile touching his lips. We fought for this flag. Now I have to go on TV and fight for what it's supposed to mean. The thought hardened his resolve. He walked onto the set. The lights were blinding, the audience a faceless shadow in the dark. In the center of it all sat Julian Croft, enthroned in a plush leather chair. His smile was a masterpiece of practiced sincerity, a predator's welcome. "Sergeant Marcus Thorne," Croft boomed, his voice a smooth, deep baritone that filled the studio. "An honor. Truly, a genuine American hero. Decorated Green Beret, visionary entrepreneur, welcome to the Croft Report. Thanks for having me, Julian," Marcus said, taking his seat, his posture a study in relaxed readiness. Croft began the dance, the feigned admiration, the setup. He lauded Marcus's service, listing a few of his commendations with theatrical gravity. He praised Aegis Solutions, calling it a testament to the American spirit. For 3 full minutes, he built Marcus up, polishing the pedestal right before he intended to kick it out from under him. Then, he leaned forward, the mask of admiration slipping just enough to reveal the glint of steel beneath. Aegis Solutions has achieved something spectacular with the Triton contract. Tell our audience, Sergeant. What's the secret? The softball. Marcus saw it coming from a mile away. No secret, Julian. Just a superior model, he answered, his tone even and confident. My team consists of the finest logisticians, planners, and problem solvers on the planet. They learned their trade not in a classroom, but in places where a single miscalculation on a supply route meant people didn't come home. We took that zero-fail mindset and applied it to disaster relief. We simply offered a better, more efficient, and more reliable solution. The government chose competence. Croft nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. Competence, a powerful word, but some in the industry are using other words. He paused, letting the silence stretch. They're asking if your company's status as a veteran-owned business gave you an unfair advantage. The first shot was fired, right on schedule. They wonder, Croft continued, turning his body slightly to address the camera, to include the millions watching at home in his insinuation. If, in today's climate, government agencies are being pressured to award these lucrative contracts based not on merit, but on the optics of patriotism, that maybe this wasn't about being the best, but about being the most feel-good story. How do you respond to that, Sergeant? The final word, Sergeant, was delivered with a subtle dismissive edge. It wasn't a title of respect anymore. It was a label, a box Croft was trying to put him in. The battle had begun. Marcus met his gaze, his eyes unblinking, his mind clear. He was on enemy turf. The ambush was sprung, and the whole world was watching. Just another day at the office. Julian Croft's accusation of an unfair advantage settled over the studio like a fine dust. He leaned back, the picture of self-satisfaction, confident he had cornered his guest with a narrative of preferential treatment. But Marcus Thorne was a master of turning an enemy's strength into a weakness. He let the silence hang for a moment before offering a calm, steady smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. That's an interesting word, Julian. Unfair. Marcus began, his voice level. Let's talk about what's unfair. Is it unfair that a company run by people who've managed logistics in the most hostile, complex environments on Earth wins a contract to do just that on home soil? Or is it unfair that for the last 30 years, these same critical contracts were often handed to a closed circle of old boy network firms, companies that donated to the right campaigns, that golfed at the right country clubs, often resulting in massive cost overruns and catastrophic failures during real-world disasters? He paused. Which of those sounds more unfair to you? Croft's smile tightened. He was losing control. He tried to steer it back. I'm not here to discuss other companies, Sergeant. I'm talking about specific federal programs, set-asides for veteran-owned businesses. Aegis Solutions qualified for and benefited from these programs. That is a fact, correct? It is, Marcus affirmed, his gaze unwavering. So, Croft pounced, sensing an admission. You did receive special treatment. Isn't that a form of government handout? A leg up that other hardworking American business owners, people who didn't serve in the military, don't get? The word handout was the payload, the poison dart. It was meant to strip him of his merit and paint him as a charity case. Marcus leaned forward, the calm demeanor giving way to a focused intensity, like a lens concentrating sunlight into a single burning point. A leg up? He repeated, the words quiet but sharp. Let me reframe that for you. For the 1% of this nation who signs a blank check payable to this country for an amount up to and including their life, the first few years out of uniform aren't about getting a leg up. It's about trying to keep their head above water. These programs aren't a handout, Julian. They are a partial repayment on a debt. They are a belated attempt by the country we served to give us a fighting chance in the economy we sacrificed to protect. Thorne could see a flicker of something in Croft's eyes. It wasn't understanding. It was a deeper resentment. It was personal for him. Croft looked at Thorne and saw a man of action, a man who had built something real from sacrifice, and he hated him for it. You talk about it like it's a boost. Marcus pressed on. But transitioning is like being airdropped into a foreign land. The language is different, the culture is alien, and all the skills that kept you alive yesterday are suddenly considered irrelevant by a society that has no frame of reference for them. That's not a level playing field. That's a disadvantage we are trying to overcome. Do you know, Julian, that the unemployment rate for veterans in the 18 to 24 age group is often nearly double the national average? To drive the point home, to rip it from the abstract and make it painfully real, Marcus brought up Sully. "Let me tell you about Staff Sergeant Mike Sully Sullivan," he said, his voice softening, becoming personal. "He was the lead aviation mechanic in my unit. A genius. This man could rebuild a Black Hawk engine in a sandstorm with a flashlight in his teeth. He kept us flying. He kept us alive. When he got out, he had a simple dream: open his own auto shop in his hometown, in Ohio." The studio was hushed. This was no longer a debate. It was a testimony. "Sully walked into a dozen banks," Marcus continued, the injustice still raw in his voice. "Perfect service record, flawless credit, a bulletproof business plan. And every single one turned him down for a small business loan. The reason? The loan officers told him, to his face, that his 10 years managing a fleet of multi-million-dollar aircraft under combat conditions didn't count as relevant management experience. They told a man who held lives in his hands that he wasn't qualified to manage a two-bay garage." Marcus let that sink in. "Sully works at a national auto parts chain now, Julian. His genius, the talent that saved American lives, is being used to upsell windshield wipers. So don't you dare talk to me about handouts. Those set-aside programs you're so concerned about," Marcus said, his voice rising with controlled passion. "They're for men like Sully. They exist to tell a loan officer that a staff sergeant's stripes are worth more than a business degree from a school his daddy paid for. It's not an unfair advantage, Julian. It's a correction for a system that is fundamentally broken." Croft, seeing the policy argument crumble, pivoted to character assassination. He gestured at Marcus. "But you, Sergeant, you've navigated this broken system masterfully. You've built a powerhouse. Some might argue you're doing more than just succeeding. You're profiting handsomely from it. They might say you're marketing patriotism for financial gain, using your service record as a brand to enrich yourself. The accusation was meant to be the kill shot, to frame his patriotism as a cynical marketing ploy." Marcus didn't even blink. The fire in his eyes burned with a cold, clear flame. "Mr. Croft, my service record isn't a brand. It's a promise. It's a promise to every veteran I hire that their sacrifices will be honored and their skills will be valued. It's a promise to our clients that we will execute our mission with a level of excellence born from absolute discipline. And it's a promise to the 22 veterans a day who lose their silent battle back home that there is purpose and brotherhood waiting for them on the other side." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet it carried across the entire studio. "So, yes, we are profitable, because we are the best at what we do. And that profit allows me to hire more men like Sully. It allows me to build a sanctuary where their skills are a badge of honor, not a footnote on a resume. Profit is the byproduct of our mission, not the other way around. That's a concept you learn when success isn't measured in dollars, but in lives saved. The words landed like precision-guided munitions. Croft's polished veneer was shattered. He had tried to frame Marcus as an undeserving beneficiary of a flawed system. Marcus had flipped the entire narrative, exposing the system itself as the problem and his company as the solution. The interview was no longer about a contract. It was about the soul of a nation and its sacred obligation to its warriors. And the final decisive engagement was yet to come. Julian Croft was a shark that had tasted blood and found it turning to poison in his mouth. He was cornered, losing control of the interview on his own show, and his professional pride was curdling into raw malice. The producers in the control room were white-knuckled, knowing this was television gold, but also that it was a runaway train. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Croft reached for his final weapon, a piece of information designed not just to question Marcus, but to shatter his credibility and break him. He shuffled some papers on his desk, a theatrical motion of a man discovering a disturbing truth. "I appreciate your passion, Sergeant," he said, his voice now slick with false sincerity. But passion, as we know, doesn't always equate to stability. He picked up a single sheet of paper, holding it between his thumb and forefinger, as if it were contaminated. "I have here a leaked internal report from a source close to Aegis Solutions. This report details A, concerning employee turnover rate in your first year of operations. It quotes a former employee as saying, and I'm reading directly, Aegis is run like a military unit, not a business. The pressure is immense, and the leadership is unforgiving." Croft looked up from the paper, his eyes like chips of ice. Some experts would argue this is a symptom of a larger systemic problem, that many veterans, despite their undeniable skills, struggle to readjust to the structure and pressures of a corporate environment. They might say that while your mission to hire veterans is noble, it makes your company a high-risk, unstable venture. He leaned forward for the kill. "Is your company truly stable, Sergeant? Or is it a fragile enterprise built on a compelling, but ultimately flawed, narrative?" This was it, the crisis point. It was a direct assault on Marcus's competence as a leader, a betrayal of the trust of every veteran who worked for him. It was an attack on their deepest scars, twisting their invisible wounds into a narrative of failure and instability. A surge of white-hot anger, pure and primal, coursed through Marcus. He felt the phantom weight of his rifle in his hands, the muscle memory of 100 hostile encounters. He wanted to stand up, to walk across that space and let Julian Croft feel the weight of his words, the gravity of the lives he was so casually maligning. But he didn't. Years of unimaginable discipline, of holding the line when every instinct screamed to charge, took over. An emotional outburst was a loss. It was exactly the clip Croft wanted. The angry, unstable veteran, his argument personified. So Marcus did something else, something far more powerful. He went still. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the kind he had learned to take before stepping into a room where death was a possibility. The noise of the studio, the lights, the hushed crew, it all faded away. In that moment of absolute stillness, he broke eye contact with Julian Croft. He turned his head with measured precision, found the red tally light on the main camera, and he looked directly into the lens. In that instant, Julian Croft ceased to exist. Marcus was no longer speaking to a reporter. He was speaking to America. "Personnel issues," Marcus began. His voice was quiet, yet it carried an authority that silenced the entire studio. "You want to talk about our turnover? Let me tell you what that really means." He paused, letting the silence hang, forcing millions of people on their couches to lean in. That turnover you're talking about was a 24-year-old Marine sergeant we hired, a kid who earned a Silver Star in Fallujah. 3 months into the job, the ghosts of that city came for him in the middle of the night. When he didn't show up for his shift, we didn't call HR. We sent his fire team leader from our company to his apartment. We kicked the door down. We found him on the floor, surrounded by pictures of the men he'd lost, with a note in his hand. We got him into the best treatment facility in the state before he could finish the job. He's not an employee on our books anymore, but he's alive. And last week I got a picture of him holding his newborn daughter. That's one of our personnel issues. The only sound was the faint electronic hum of the cameras. You want another one? Marcus continued, his gaze a burning point in the center of the screen. A Navy corpsman, a brilliant woman who managed field triage for an entire platoon under fire. She was one of our top project managers. But she was fighting a brutal custody battle. Her ex-husband's lawyer was using her deployments to argue she was an unfit mother. The stress was destroying her, so we didn't just give her paid leave. We put our company's top legal counsel on her case, pro bono. We flew 2 women from her old unit across the country to testify about her character, her courage, her love for her children. She won. She kept her kids. She decided to move back to her hometown, to be with them full-time, and we helped her find a new job there. That was another one of our turnover statistics. He took another deep, steadying breath. These aren't liabilities, Mr. Croft. They are the invisible wounds our people carry. They are the cost of freedom that doesn't show up on a corporate balance sheet. You call it a business risk. We call it a moral imperative. You see instability. I see a team of men and women who will walk through hell for each other, whether it's in a firefight in some forgotten valley or in a conference room in Dallas. We don't just hire veterans. We take care of our own. It's a code. It's called Leave No Man Behind. You wouldn't understand. The monologue was a thunderclap that shook the foundations of the studio. He had taken Croft's ugliest accusation and forged it into a shield of honor. Then slowly, Marcus Thorne turned his head back to Julian Croft. The smugness was gone from the reporter's face, replaced by a pale, stunned expression. He looked like a man who had pulled the pin on a grenade, only to have it gently placed back in his own hand. "So yes, Mr. Croft," Marcus said, his voice now a devastating whisper that was louder than any shout. "We have issues. They are the scars this country asked us to bear in its defense. We carry them. We help our brothers and sisters carry them, and we still manage to get the job done better, faster, and more effectively than any of your polished, perfect corporations. The real question isn't about my company's stability." He leaned forward one last time. "The real question is, what has anyone like you ever done for these people, besides sit in that comfortable chair and pass judgment on the cost of their sacrifice?" Absolute, crushing silence. Julian Croft opened his mouth, a faint, sputtering sound escaping. He was broken. A frantic voice screamed in his earpiece, "Cut to commercial, now!" Croft, looking utterly defeated, turned to the camera with a forced, twitching smile. We'll be right back. After this." The lights dimmed. The battle on set was over. Marcus Thorne had won. But the war for the narrative, for the very soul of his mission, was just beginning. What Marcus did in that moment went beyond a simple interview. He held up a mirror to the nation. Let us know in the comments below. Was the reporter out of line, or was he just doing his job? We want to hear your voice. The moment the studio lights dimmed, the spell was broken. Julian Croft, his face a mask of pale fury, ripped out his earpiece and stormed off the set, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The studio, once a silent battlefield, erupted into a low hum of controlled chaos. Producers huddled, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They knew this wasn't just a segment that had gone off the rails. It was a cultural firestorm they had unleashed, and Sergeant Marcus Thorne was standing calmly at its epicenter. By the time Marcus was in the car heading back to his office, his phone was no longer just a communication device. It was a solid brick of heat and light, a conduit for a nation's raw, unfiltered reaction. The clip was everywhere. Not the full interview, but the final, devastating 5 minutes. The turn to the camera, the monologue on what personnel issues truly meant, the surgical dismantling of Julian Croft. It was sliced, diced, and shared across every platform imaginable under a blizzard of hashtags. Second Thorne, She Leave No Man Behind, the real cost. The reaction was immediate and deeply divided, splitting along the invisible fault lines of American society. From one side, a tidal wave of overwhelming support. Veteran forums and social media groups lit up with messages of profound gratitude. He said what we've all been thinking for 20 years. Military families shared the clip with the caption, "This is the truth of what comes after the uniform comes off." Emails flooded the Aegis Solutions server, not from potential clients, but from everyday veterans who just wanted to say, "Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for speaking for us." A Vietnam veteran from Ohio, a man in his 70s, left a voicemail on Marcus's office line, his voice thick with an emotion that spanned 5 decades. "Son, I've waited 50 years to hear a man say those words on television. God bless you." But with the light came the darkness. The other side of America reacted with predictable venom. Pundits on cable news, their faces grim, called him defensive and emotionally volatile. Online trolls, hiding behind anonymous avatars, accused him of using his service as a shield to deflect legitimate business questions. A prominent editorial in a national newspaper argued that while Thorne's service was commendable, he displayed a dangerous emotionalism unfit for a corporate leader, proving Croft's point for him. The attacks were personal, vicious, and aimed at the very core of his identity as a soldier and a leader. The business impact was just as swift and polarized. Dave, his loyal second-in-command, briefed him the next morning. "Okay, boss. Good news and bad news," Dave said, his face grim, but with a spark of pride in his eyes. "We lost the Henderson account. Their board said we're too controversial now. But the CEO of Omnicorp is on line 1, and the Vanguard Foundation is on line 2. They don't want to talk about contracts, Marcus. They want to talk about your mission." For every door that had been slammed shut by fear and misunderstanding, a bigger one was being blown wide open by respect and inspiration. The CEO of Omnicorp, a titan of industry, told Marcus a story about his own father, a Marine who came back from Korea and fought for years to build a small hardware store. "What you said yesterday, that was my dad's entire life," the CEO said. "Let's talk about how we can help you build." The Vanguard Foundation, a multi-billion-dollar philanthropic organization, made an even more stunning offer. They wanted to fund a new national initiative with Aegis Solutions at the helm to create a real-world transition program for veterans, one that addressed PTSD, family strain, and purpose-driven employment head-on. They didn't just want to give him a contract. They wanted to empower his cause. Marcus sat in his office, the whirlwind of the last 48 hours finally settling. He looked at the lucrative, game-changing offers on his desk. It was a victory, no doubt, but it didn't feel like the end of a battle. It felt like the beginning of a much larger war. He thought of Mikey and Sully and the countless others. He had won the argument, but in doing so, he had enlisted himself in a new, longer conflict. A war fought not in desert valleys, but in boardrooms, in community halls, and in the hearts and minds of a nation that too often forgot its warriors after the welcome home parades were over. The victory was real, but peace was a long way off. This profound lesson crystallized his purpose. Success wasn't about the contracts you win, but the mission you serve. The deepest scars of service weren't weaknesses to be hidden, but sources of unimaginable strength, resilience, and empathy. They were not liabilities. They were his and his team's greatest asset. The story of Sergeant Marcus Thorne no longer belonged to him alone. It now belonged to every warrior who ever felt forgotten, every family who ever bore the silent cost of service. The final scene we see of him isn't in a gleaming boardroom or on another television set. It's weeks later, in the humble wood-paneled hall of a local VFW post. The room is filled with young men and women, their faces a mix of military bravado and civilian uncertainty, all recently discharged. Marcus isn't on a stage. He's sitting at a folding table with them, a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hand. He's not giving a speech. He's listening. He's hearing their stories, their fears, their hopes. He tells them about the new transition program, about the real support that is coming. The final shot is of Marcus shaking the hand of a young female Marine, no older than 22. Her eyes are filled with an anxiety he knows all too well. He looks at her, and for a moment, the CEO, the public figure, the viral sensation, it all falls away. He is simply a veteran seeing another veteran. He gives her a firm, reassuring nod, his voice quiet but unbreakable. "Welcome home," he says. "We've got your 6." Sergeant Thorne walked onto that television set to defend his business. He walked off as a leader for a generation of forgotten warriors. In the quiet fury of his truth, he dismantled a narrative of doubt and disrespect. He proved to the world that the most powerful weapon in a soldier's arsenal isn't a rifle, but a voice, speaking for those who have been silenced for too long. He reminded all of us that the real work of honoring our veterans begins long after the last soldier has come home. In the end, Sergeant Marcus Thorne didn't just win an argument. He reminded us of a truth we seem to have forgotten. He walked out of that television studio not into the simple peace of victory, but into the heavy honor of a new mission, a mission that continues long after the cameras stop rolling. His story reveals a silent battlefield that exists in the heart of every warrior who comes home. It's a fight not for territory, but for purpose, a struggle for dignity in a world that often salutes the uniform, but forgets the man who wore it. It's a daily battle, fought with quiet resilience against the ghosts of the past and the challenges of the present. Honor, we learn, isn't just measured by the medals on a chest. True honor is revealed in the character of a person long after the guns have fallen silent. It's in the promise kept to a fallen brother. It's in the strength to carry your own invisible wounds while helping another carry theirs. It's in the integrity that seeks no applause, but commands respect. Marcus Thorne held up a mirror that day. He forced us to look at ourselves and ask a difficult question. What is our real duty to those who have already completed theirs? Because the true measure of a nation is not found in the strength of its armies, but in how it treats its warriors when they finally return to the quiet streets of home. These are the stories that define the soul of our country. They need to be told, and they need to be heard. If you believe that honor, sacrifice, and justice deserve a voice, please help us give them one. Like this video, share it with someone who understands, and subscribe to NX Incredible Stories, because every story matters, and every warrior deserves to be remembered.